General Zolath of the Kryn Empire strode down the ramp of his starship, his cape billowing behind him in the breeze. Earth's pale yellow sun glinted off his sleek black armor as he surveyed the primitive military base before him. A dozen human soldiers snapped to attention as he approached, their uniforms crisp and postures rigid. "Welcome to Camp Ajax, General Zolath," their commander said, stepping forward and extending a hand in the odd human greeting custom. "I'm Colonel Lance Briggs. We're honored to have you observe our training exercises." Zolath regarded the proffered hand for a moment before grasping it briefly. The human's grip was surprisingly firm for such a fragile-looking species. "I look forward to seeing what your warriors are capable of, Colonel," Zolath replied, his voice a deep rumble. "The Galactic Council is considering your people's petition to join. I am here to assess your military preparedness." Colonel Briggs nodded. "I understand, General. We're eager to demonstrate what human soldiers can do. If you'll follow me, we'll head to the combat simulation arena, where some of our top units are running urban warfare drills." Zolath fell into step beside the colonel as they marched across the sun-baked asphalt. Around them, the base buzzed with activity. Surface vehicles called Humvees rumbled by. Strange flying craft thrummed overhead, and everywhere humans of all sizes and colors went about their duties with purposeful strides. For a low-tech species, they seemed to have achieved an impressive level of organization and discipline, Zolath had to admit. They arrived at a massive domed structure. Colonel Briggs ushered Zolath through a set of blast doors into an observation booth overlooking a vast indoor arena. Below, the combat sim zone was a labyrinth of crumbling ferrocrete walls and rubble, dotted with husks of burnt-out vehicles. It looked like a war-torn hellscape. "This is our NOUT training center, Military Operations in Urban Terrain," Briggs explained. "In this scenario, an elite Marine unit must navigate the combat zone to secure a high-value target, while an opposing force of equal strength tries to stop them. Trainee soldiers play the OPFOR. Only sim rounds are used, but it's otherwise full combat conditions." Zolath peered down at the arena with interest. A dozen humans in digital camo fatigues crouched at one end of the battlefield, performing last-minute equipment checks on their sleek black rifles. At the far end, a similar group in gray urban camo prepared to repel them. A voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "Attention all personnel. Exercise commencing in 10 seconds. 9, 8. The soldiers tensed, readying weapons. 3, 2, 1. Engage, engage. Chaos erupted. The black-clad Marines surged forward, bounding between cover. Gunfire ripped the air as the OPFOR opened up on them. Concrete exploded into dust. Zolath watched, fascinated, as the humans wove a deadly dance. Soldiers sprinted, dove, and rolled, always keeping their spacing, laying down suppressive fire for each other. Their coordination was impressive, almost hive-like. 2 Marines broke left, throwing smoke grenades. Flashes of light and jets of vapor crisscrossed the arena, tracing eerie paths through the billowing smoke. The radio crackled with curt human voices. "Alpha, advance to phase line Bravo. Bravo copies, moving. Charlie, shift suppressing fire to Sector 7. To Zolath's eye, it was barely controlled chaos, but the humans clearly knew their roles with drilled precision. Fire teams bounded from cover to cover in perfectly timed leapfrogs, alternately shooting and moving. Second squad, clear that strip mall. First squad, prep to breach the bank. 2 groups split off without missing a beat, one stacking up alongside a bullet-pocked building while the other charged a crumbling storefront. Flashbang grenades arced through blown-out windows. Soldiers poured in, sweeping the interiors with ruthless efficiency. In mere minutes, the attacking Marines had pushed the OPFOR back to their final defensive positions. A barked command sent a fire team dashing to the flank. They tossed a chain of frag grenades and stormed the position under the cover of gizzering explosions. It was over. The OPFOR's guns fell silent as the Marines consolidated their spoils, one tattered flag, and the dead body of a trainee soldier designated as the HVT. Colonel Briggs turned to Zolath, something like pride shining in the human's eyes. "So, what do you think of our combat skills, General?" Zolath didn't respond for a long moment. His mind reeled as it recalibrated the low-threat assessment he'd had of this primitive species. What he'd just witnessed was the work of true warriors, their techniques honed by millennia of incessant conflict on their war-torn homeworld. Their ferocity, their coordination, Their lethally efficient mastery of their tools of warfare, it was breathtaking, terrifying. And this had only been a training exercise. Zolaf shuddered to imagine what humanity might be capable of when unleashed against a real enemy. The Galactic Council had no idea what they were getting themselves into. This upstart species could upset the balance of power in the galaxy if their potential was left unchecked. Their petition to join the Council could not be approved. Humanity was far too dangerous. Zolaf schooled his features into a neutral mask as he turned to Colonel Briggs. There could be no hint of his true thoughts. "Your troops are adequate, Colonel, for a species at your stage of development. I look forward to observing them further." The human smiled, taking that for high praise. If only he knew. Zolaf followed Briggs out of the observation post, his mind whirling with contingencies. This visit to Earth had become more than a mere inspection tour. It was now a vital mission for the future security of the Kryn Empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The human threat had to be assessed in full, and then, if necessary, extinguished before it could set the stars ablaze. For now, Zolaf would watch and plan. The games had only just begun. General Zolaf stood at the edge of a vast field, the wind whipping his cape behind him. Before him stretched an obstacle course of staggering proportions and complexity. Towering walls, tangled nets, shimmering energy fields, and other incomprehensible impediments formed a gauntlet that seemed to mock the very idea of being traversed. Colonel Briggs stood beside him, a hint of a smile on his face. "This is the gauntlet, General. Every soldier, regardless of specialty, must pass this course to be certified for active duty. It is the ultimate test of human endurance, agility, and problem-solving." Zolaf eyed the course skeptically. "It looks challenging," he allowed. Privately, he doubted any creature lacking wings or teleportation could make it through intact. Certainly not any human. Briggs chuckled. "That it is, General. That it is. But overcoming challenges is what we humans do best." Lieutenant Singh, a lean, sinewy human female, trotted over and snapped a crisp salute. "Sir, Lieutenant Priya Singh here holds the current course record. She'll be demonstrating the gauntlet for us today." Singh stepped up to the starting line, a look of pure focus on her face. A klaxon blared, and she exploded into motion, racing toward the first obstacle, a sheer ferrocrete wall 4 times her height. Zolaf watched, astonished, as Singh bounded up the wall in a series of rapid leaps, fingers and toes finding impossibly tiny crevices to propel her upward. In seconds, she had scaled the vertical face and disappeared over the top. "How?" Zolaf began, but Colonel Briggs held up a hand, his eyes never leaving the course. Singh reappeared, sprinting across a field of churning mud. Robotic tentacles burst from the mire, grasping at her legs. She hurtled and dodged, nimbly evading their clutches without breaking stride. Next came a shimmering cyan energy field. Singh plucked a small device from her belt and jammed it into a port at the base of the emitter pylon. The field flickered and died, leaving scorch marks on Singh's uniform, but no serious damage. On she ran. A gout of flame erupted before her as she neared the next obstacle. Singh never hesitated. She hit the ground in a roll, letting her momentum carry her beneath the inferno. In a heartbeat, she was back on her feet, leaping for a cable that hung tantalizingly out of reach. Her fingers closed around the cord, and she swung out across a yawning chasm. At the apex of the arc, she let go, sailing through the air like a human projectile. She crashed into a rope net strung across the far side, clambering through the gaps with simian agility. And still she did not slow. Crawling, leaping, swinging, scrambling, Singh conquered barrier after barrier, each more fiendishly difficult than the last. Robotic drones harried her. Stun lasers flashed. Minefields erupted. The gauntlet threw every conceivable hazard in her path, and she overcame them all. Finally, after an eternity that Zolaf's chrono assured him was a mere 27 minutes, Lieutenant Singh vaulted the final wall and skidded to a halt at the finish line. She was bruised, burned, and coated in every substance known to xenochemistry. But she was victorious. Colonel Briggs made a show of tapping a control on his wrist. A new course record. "Well done, Lieutenant." Singh saluted crisply. If she felt any fatigue, it didn't show. "Thank you, sir." Zolaf shook his head slowly, still struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. That was Impressive, Colonel. Your Lieutenant Singh is an exceptional specimen. She is indeed, but she's not unique, General. Every human soldier is forged in the crucible of the gauntlet. We adapted to excel in any environment, against any obstacle. It's why we're the most versatile force in the galaxy. Zoleth could only nod. He was beginning to understand why the Galactic Council feared these humans. Their tenacity, their indomitable will to overcome, it was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. And if every human warrior was crafted to the standard of Lieutenant Singh, Zoleth shuddered to contemplate a galaxy in which humanity ran unchecked. Colonel Briggs was eyeing him speculatively. You know, General, while impressive, the gauntlet is still only a simulation. Perhaps you'd like to see our soldiers perform in a more realistic scenario. A sense of dread settled in Zoleth's gut. He had a feeling he wasn't going to like what the human colonel had in mind, but he had to know the full extent of the human threat. For the good of the Kryn Empire, he had to see it through. Lead on, Colonel Briggs, he said with a fatalistic sigh. Show me what other terrifying skills your species has in its arsenal. Briggs grinned, a gleam of challenge in his eyes. I thought you'd never ask, General. I thought you'd never ask. Zoleth followed the human across the base, resigned to his fate. These Terrans would be the death of him, if they didn't end up being the death of the entire galaxy first. Only time, and the unwavering grit of humanity, would tell. The staccato crack of gunfire echoed across the training compound as General Zoleth and Colonel Briggs approached a low, nondescript building. Soldiers in full battle rattle crouched, ran, and rolled around the structure, weapons spitting flame. What fresh hell is this? Zoleth muttered under his breath. Briggs grinned. This, General, is the kill house. It's where our troops perfect the art of close-quarters battle. Come, let's observe from the viewing platform. They ascended a metal staircase to a small observation deck overlooking the facility. Below, Zoleth could see that the building was actually a sprawling complex of rooms, halls, and stairs, peppered with obstacles, cover points, and blind corners. A three-dimensional maze designed for one purpose: urban warfare. A squad of soldiers stacked up at an entrance, checking weapons and equipment. Their leader, a grizzled sergeant with a scar bisecting his cheek, raised a fist and counted down. 3, 2, 1. They exploded into motion, pouring through the door in a choreographed ballet of violence. Flash grenades strobed. Smoke billowed. Strings of muzzle flashes lit the gloom as the soldiers flowed from room to room, clearing each with ruthless efficiency. Targets popped up from behind barricades and doorways, humanoid silhouettes, and armored drones. The soldiers engaged them with precise bursts of fire, downing each with a minimum of wasted shots. Threat left. Cover me. Moving. Room clear. Stack up on Bravo. Their comm chatter was clipped, professional. Each man knew his role, trusted his brothers implicitly. They were a well-oiled machine, a lethal instrument forged in the fires of training and tempered on the anvil of combat. Zoleth watched, mesmerized, as the humans sliced through the kill house like a vibrock knife, through Threlka steak. Briggs narrated their progress, pride evident in his voice. Sergeant Hawkins and Fireteam Alpha, some of our best CQB specialists, veterans of a dozen campaigns on as many worlds. Watch how they use the angles, slicing the pie around corners. Minimal exposure, maximum violence of action. Hawkins and his men vaulted a barricade, taking down a pair of pop-up targets on the fly. They barely broke stride, flowing up a stairwell to the second floor. More gunfire erupted, accompanied by the booms of breaching charges as they forced entry to new rooms. Why the smoke, the noise? Zoleth asked, wincing as another string of flashbangs went off. Wouldn't that just alert the enemy to their presence? Briggs shook his head. On the contrary, General. Shock and awe. It keeps the enemy off balance, disrupts their OODA loop, and the chaos works to our advantage. We train to operate in the fog of war, to thrive in it. Confusion and mayhem are our force multipliers. To demonstrate his point, Hawkins and his team suddenly found themselves pinned down by a pair of entrenched drones, laying down a blistering barrage of suppressing fire. Trapped in a narrow hallway with no cover, it seemed their advance had stalled. But the humans were not so easily defeated. A pair of smoke grenades sailed down the hall, enveloping the drone's position in a cloud of roiling black vapor. Heartbeats later, two soldiers dashed through the obscuring smog, pirouetting around the flank. It was over in seconds. The drones fell, circuit boards sparking, as the flankers unloaded on them from behind. Zolaf shook his head, marveling. Even in the midst of chaos, the humans working seamlessly as a unit, adapting and overcoming. The fire team regrouped and pressed on, stacking up on the final door. The thump of a breaching charge shook the walls, and they stormed through the breach, smoke trailing from blackened armor. A final fusillade of gunfire. And then silence. Hill House clear. Sergeant Hawkins' voice crackled over the comms. All threats neutralized. Alpha, consolidate on me, and prep for exfil. Zolaf let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Beside him, Colonel Briggs practically vibrated with paternal pride. Impressed, General. That's the skill of the modern human warfighter. In any environment, against any foe, we will find a way to prevail. It is impressive, Zolaf allowed, a master of understatement as ever. Inwardly, his mind whirled with the implications of what he'd just seen. Individual human prowess was fearsome enough, but their ability to work together, to act as a coordinated unit even amid the fog and friction of battle, that was the true source of their strength, and that strength was terrifying. I think I have seen enough of your training facilities for one day, Colonel, he said, fighting to keep his voice level. Perhaps we could retire to someplace more peaceful to discuss my findings. Briggs eyed him speculatively, a knowing glint in his gaze, as if he could sense the turmoil beneath Zolaf's composed exterior. Of course, General. I have just the place in mind. If you'll follow me. He led the way down from the platform, Zolaf trailing in his wake. The General's mind raced as he tried to process all he had learned about the human threat. Their courage, their skill, their indomitable will. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And now it was his job to find a way to stop them, before it was too late, before humanity spread to the stars in earnest and reshaped the very fabric of galactic civilization. But as he followed Colonel Briggs across the sun-drenched training ground, Zolaf couldn't shake the sinking feeling that it might already be far, far too late. The age of humans had dawned, and the galaxy would tremble before it. The command center buzzed with activity as technicians and officers moved between holographic displays, their faces lit by the eerie glow of battle space telemetry. In the center of the cavernous room, a massive holotable displayed a real-time tactical map of the training area, 100 square kilometers of rough terrain and mocked-up objectives. General Zolaf stood at the table's edge, Colonel Briggs at his side. The human officer pointed to a pulsing blue icon on the map. There's Fireteam Alpha now, moving to secure Objective Whiskey. They're up against a company strength OP4, dug in and waiting for them. Zolaf studied the map, noting the red icons massed around the objective. Your soldiers are outnumbered 10-1. Surely this is an unwinnable scenario. Briggs just smiled. Never underestimate human ingenuity, General. Watch and learn. On the map, Alpha pushed forward, hurtling over terrain with superhuman endurance. As they neared the objective, the OP4 sprang their trap. Red icons surged forward, enveloping the fire team. Zolaf leaned in, expecting to see the blue icons wink out, but they held fast. The engagement descended into a swirling melee, red and blue dancing around each other in a deadly waltz. Alpha's pinned down. A technician called out. They're requesting fire support. Briggs nodded. Bring the rain. On the holotable, new icons appeared, streaking towards the fray from off-map. Moments later, the ground shook as artillery rained down on the OP4 positions. Explosions blossomed, red icons disappearing in droves. But still the enemy pressed their attack, heedless of losses. For every red icon that vanished, two more seemed to take its place. They swarmed over Alpha's position like ants over a carcass. They're being overrun, Zolaf exclaimed. Surely this was the end for the valiant fire team. Briggs' eyes never left the map. Wait for it. Suddenly, new blue icons appeared at the edge of the holotable, moving at incredible speed. They slammed into the OP4's flank like a thunderbolt, scattering red icons like chaff before a storm. Reinforcements? Zolaf asked, astonished. But how? Briggs grinned wolfishly. That's Fireteam Bravo in the new Manticore, APCs. Fast, agile, and packing enough firepower to level a city block. They were holding in reserve, waiting for the right moment to strike. On the map, the tide had turned. Bravo rolled over the OPFOR positions, their cannons flashing. Missiles streaked from launch pods, sowing merciless destruction. Within minutes, the red icons had been swept from the field, leaving only shattered wrecks and craters. Alpha and Bravo linked up, consolidating their position. Wounded were triaged, ammunition distributed. Then, as one, they pushed on to Objective Whiskey, taking it with clockwork precision. Zoloth shook his head, marveling at the humans' tactical acumen. I've never seen its like. Your soldiers snatched victory from certain defeat, and your war machines, they are fearsome things. The war games aren't over yet, General, Briggs replied, a sly glint in his eye. That was just the first salvo. The OPFOR won't take the loss of Whiskey lying down. I wouldn't count them out just yet. Zoloth frowned, turning back to the map. Sure enough, new red icons were flooding onto the field, massing for a counterattack. The scattered survivors of the first engagement rallied, bolstered by fresh reinforcements. In moments, what had been a rout became a pitched battle once more. The humans met the resurgent OPFOR as they always did, with fire, fury, and indomitable will. Fire teams clashed in brutal close-quarters combat. APC guns roared, missiles streaked across the battle space. Medics braved withering fire to drag wounded comrades to safety. And through it all, Colonel Briggs narrated the unfolding carnage with the grim satisfaction of a man witnessing his life's work play out in all its terrible splendor. You see, General, this is the human way of war. Adapt, overcome, endure. We are never stronger than when we are tested, when all seems lost. That is when our true strength shines through. Zoloth could only nod mutely, transfixed by the drama playing out on the holo-table. He had come to Earth expecting to find a primitive, warlike species scrabbling in the dirt of their homeworld. Instead, he found a race of indomitable warriors, forged by millennia of conflict into something as terrifying as it was awe-inspiring. The galaxy was not ready for humanity. Perhaps it never would be. And as Zoloth watched the battle rage on the ever-shifting sands of simulated war, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing not just a war game, but a portent of things to come. A glimpse of a future where humanity's flag flew over 1,000 conquered worlds, and the galaxy trembled at the sound of their war cry. And in that moment, Zoloth knew true fear. General Zoloth stood on the landing pad, his cape snapping in the downwash of the waiting shuttle's engines. Colonel Briggs stood before him, hand extended in the human gesture of farewell. It's been an honor hosting you, General, Briggs shouted over the roar of the turbines. I hope your visit has been illuminating. Zoloth took the proffered hand, shaking it firmly. More than you know, Colonel. More than you know. He'd seen enough over the past few days to haunt his dreams for a lifetime. The skill and ferocity of human warriors, their indomitable will, their mastery of the art of war. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And now it fell to him to convey the gravity of the threat to the Galactic Council, to make them understand the sleeping giant they were poking with a stick. He had no illusions about the difficulty of the task. The Council was complacent, convinced of their own supremacy. They would not want to hear that a young, primitive species from the galactic backwater might one day eclipse them all. But he had to try, for the sake of the Kryn Imperium, and for the galaxy at large. He met Colonel Briggs' eyes, wondering how much this canny human already suspected of his inner thoughts. Your people have a saying, I believe. May you live in interesting times. I fear our galaxy is about to become very interesting indeed. Briggs' gaze sharpened, but he said only, We'll be ready for it, General. Whatever comes, humanity will face it head-on, as we always have. Of that, Zoloth had no doubt. It was the rest of the galaxy that concerned him. With a final nod, he turned and strode up the shuttle's ramp. The flight crew snapped to attention as he entered the main cabin and made his way to his acceleration couch. As the shuttle lifted into the sky and clawed for space, Zoloth stared out the viewport at the receding Earth. From this height, it looked so peaceful, a blue-green marble floating serenely against the black. But Zoloth knew better now. He'd seen the fire that burned within, the warlike spirit that animated this seemingly tranquil world. The fire that would soon spread to the stars themselves, if he couldn't find a way to stop it. He turned from the viewport with a heavy sigh, calling up a blank holoscreen. He had a report to write, a warning to sound, difficult though it might be for the Council to hear. Humanity was rising, and the galaxy trembled on the cusp of a new age, the age of Homo sapiens, ascendant. And may the gods help them all if they stood in humanity's way. Zolef began to type, pouring everything he'd seen and learned into the document. Every fear, every dire prediction. He could only pray it would be enough to avert the coming storm. The storm that was humanity, unleashed.